Hello everybody, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining me today, so excited to have you. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. This is the latest Star Wars game from EA, and it's actually been doing incredibly well. Now, this game came out a couple of weeks ago, and reviews were, I would say, decent. It was certainly above average. Over on OpenCritic, getting a strong rating of 83, with 86% of critics recommending the game. That basically says that although the game might not be perfect, and it's had some issues which will drag the score down a little bit, most critics still recommend the game.
Jedi Fallen Order creates one of the best Star Wars experiences in years.
It's been ages since we got a great single-player Star Wars action game.
Everybody who is a fan of this series should absolutely buy this game.
The general consensus on the game was that it's pretty good, but most notably, this was a AAA EA game with 0 microtransactions. And that's a pretty big thing. Let us not forget that it was a Star Wars game that brought about one of EA's more recent fiascos, specifically surrounding the loot boxes and
Star Wars Battlefront 2 is pay to win.
Even before the launch of Star Wars Battlefront 2, Electronic Arts found itself under scrutiny for its handling of microtransactions and the loot crate system in the game.
And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't try to inform you guys. That, number one, are these fucking loot crates.
that kind of snowballed into further discussion about a lot of microtransactions and how they present themselves in the gaming industry.
Do you consider loot boxes to be an ethical feature?
Well, first, we don't call them loot boxes. I think that was...
Whatever term you wish to apply to them,
so
do you consider them ethical?
So what we look at as surprise mechanics.
Do you have? Are you equally comfortable and relaxed about
For
them?
all of the games we have on the market that have a randomized content mechanic, a surprise mechanic, a loot box, I have no qualms that they are implemented in an unethical way.
So there's no question that EA was a little bit weary of repeating that process with their next Star Wars game. In the months leading up to the launch of Jedi Fallen Order, EA made it plainly clear that the game would not have loot boxes or microtransactions, and went further on to say that they also won't be adding them post-launch, which so far, that's true. People were super stoked, like, great, an EA game, a Star Wars game, nothing to purchase, you just buy the game and that's it, awesome. But there was the question of, what is this gonna mean for the game? Is it gonna impact sales? How is the game gonna perform? Well, apparently, it's performing quite well. So earlier today, an article came out from Business Wire, which talked about the sales of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and how it is actually EA's fastest selling digital launch for a Star Wars game ever. It also is EA's top-selling Star Wars title on PC in its initial launch window. You gotta pay attention to how this thing is worded, of course. This isn't EA's fastest-selling game ever. It's their fastest-selling digital launch for a Star Wars game. That's the funny thing about these kind of these accolades. You gotta really pay attention to how those things are worded, because they can say that something's like the best-selling if they add a bunch of caveats to it, and that's basically what they're doing here. But regardless of caveats or not, the game's not doing poorly. Like, when compared to other EA Star Wars games, this thing is certainly doing very well. Jedi Fallen Order is a critical success, as well as being the highest rated Star Wars game of this console generation, which doesn't necessarily say much for Jedi Fallen Order, as it speaks to how poorly those other Star Wars games were rated. Business Insider exclaims that Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is the best Star Wars game ever made. Might be reaching a little bit. I really like the game, but GQ notes that the game lives up to the hype, while IGN says it's an all-around amazing game in their 9 out of 10 review. And overall, I would agree. I think Jedi Fallen Order is a fantastic game. I don't play a lot of single-player games because, frankly, most of them bore the tears out of me. I just can't make it. I've tried numerous times to play Red Dead Redemption 2, and I just fall asleep after a couple hours. For whatever reason, Jedi Fallen Order has me hooked. It's managed to pull me away from most of the kind of the loot-based games or the competitive shooters, the kind of games that I tend to play aren't this, but I've really enjoyed this, and I think overall it's a pretty good game. Not perfect, it's got some flaws, but I think it's certainly pretty good overall. So I'm not terribly surprised that the game is doing well. I think it's important to note here too that besides the game being decent on its own merits, a portion of the success of this has to be related to a lot of the marketing that's going around Star Wars in general. We've got the Mandalorian launch with Disney Plus, we've got the upcoming film. There's a lot of discussion and hype around Star Wars in general, and there's no doubt that even indirectly that is feeding into the success of this game and the sales that they've seen so far. Regardless, I think Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is good, and I'm glad that it's seeing the success, but this also feeds into the larger conversation of what does this mean for like microtransactions? You know, EA has this tendency to put microtransactions in these games in order to bring in some more money over the long term. And even though Jedi Fallen Order is getting a bunch of accolades, I'm gonna be hard pressed to believe that this game will come even close to touching the highest grossing EA games. So a quick search of the highest grossing video game franchises of all time does put one of EA's titles near the top, that being FIFA, with an estimated 10 billion in earnings as of 2018. And then second to that, you're looking at Madden NFL and Need for Speed and Gran Turismo coming in at about $4 billion in revenue. Further down, Battlefield earning an estimated 2.74 billion, The Sims earning about 2.5 billion. As you can see, FIFA just blowing everything else of theirs out of the water. Now again, these are estimates. This isn't 100% guaranteed accurate, but I think it's been pretty well known for a while that FIFA brings in a ton of money, and that is thanks to their microtransactions. Without microtransactions, I think it's pretty much impossible. When you're just going off of the box price, you have to sell an absurd number of copies to get to the revenue that you see in these games of microtransactions. So I think that this helps in the argument that, hey, you can release a single player game with no microtransactions and you can still do really well. The game can perform well if it's a good game and you can make a lot of money. However, companies like EA, they don't just want to make some money, they want to make all the money. And especially when you've got investors involved, making some money isn't as good if you could double, triple, quadruple that amount if you just threw some cosmetic microtransactions in it. Not that I'm saying that I want that to happen. Trust me, I don't think that this is going to sway EA from continuing to pour microtransactions into a lot of the big releases that they come out with. I think that's just going to continue to happen, but at least we have something on our side, I suppose, that we can point to and say, you know what, you put out this game, it was single player, there were no microtransactions, it did really well. EA will probably say, yeah, sure, it made X amount of millions of dollars, but check out these games of ours that do have microtransactions that have made billions of dollars. It's gonna be a hard argument to fight against, but I'm just happy to see that this is doing well. I'm happy the game turned out well. Playing this game really feels like stepping into a time machine before we had digital store pop-ups every time we log in, before battle passes and loot boxes and games that were just completely filled with microtransactions, and it's been a nice break. I've really enjoyed this game quite a bit so far. I still have to finish it. I think I've put like 15 hours in. I don't know how close I am to being done, honestly. I'm kind of just enjoying myself. I'm getting my ass kicked a little bit because Grandmaster difficulty doesn't screw around, I'll tell you that much. So yeah, while I don't think that this is going to mean the end of microtransactions because they released a game that did well without one, maybe if nothing else, this kind of bolsters the idea that you could still spend money and developing a single player game sans microtransactions. I don't know, we'll see how well this ends up doing and how it compares to a lot of their other games. I don't think it will touch anywhere close to what a lot of their microtransaction loot box based games earn in terms of overall lifetime revenue and all that. Maybe if it does well enough to reach a certain point in a graph, they say, yeah, we'll keep making some more of these. Fingers crossed. I've been really enjoying the Star Wars universe recently. I've been watching The Mandalorian, has been pretty cool. Baby Yoda is adorable. And honestly, this is making me nostalgic for the Old Republic. The SOTOR is a game I really enjoyed. Maybe I'll go check that out again. I don't know. Jedi Fallen Order, it's pretty cool. The game's doing really well, and there's no microtransactions. Look at that.